بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وصلواته وسلامه تعالى على نبيه الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Earlier I posted a little video. Actually I went live and was playing a Moroccan scholar of Qur'an, a Qari Sheikh Yunus Uswailis, Allah ta'ala, may Allah bless and preserve him. And I was saying that the Qur'an is something that we can take relief from. And the sciences of the Qur'an, before you even get into the field of tafsir or lugha, the Arabic language, just the sciences of the Qur'an itself, the tajweed, the riwayat, right, the pronunciation, the recitation, the different narrations, is an ocean. One that I enjoy bathing in from time to time. Now, many of you are accustomed to hearing one kind of qira'ah. And just sometimes you might hear these words interchanged. Qira'ah, tajweed, maqam or maqamat, riwayah. What do these things mean? So like everything else in Islam, right, what we have is through transmission. We often think of the science of transmission, isnad, the plural, asanid. We often think of hadith, right, or the aqwal al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, the statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, that are collected in books that we all know, like the sound collections of al-Bukhari and Muslim Sahih, al-Bukhari, Sahih, Muslim, Sunan, Abu Dawood, al-Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, al-Bayhaqi, Riyad al-Salihin, so on and so on. And we often associate with, for instance, An Ibn Abbas, or An Abi Hurairata, right, according to Abu Huraira, or according to Ibn Abbas, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, right, the Prophet said, so on and so on. And we think of this as the chain of narration, of course, you know, from the Prophet to the Sahaba, and then on and on and on and on and on, right, until the person who compiled the collection, right? We tend to think of this as isnad, which it is, right? It is. And we tend to not think of it in the same way with the Qur'an. But there is a chain also of narration of how the Qur'an comes from us. Allah sent down, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ, right? Allah sent down the Qur'an. Jibril, the angel Gabriel, alayhi salam, is then the messenger who delivers this Qur'an, brings it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet then transmits this to his community, and then it disperses throughout into the community through a number of ways. And this is one of the reasons why we have different recitations and narrations of the Qur'an. And to help understand what this means, so for instance, if you were to open up, say, the typical mushaf, right, meaning the typical copy of the Qur'an, actually, hold on. Ta-da! So if you were to open up the typical Qur'an, and this is not a typical Qur'an actually. This is a particular recitation of the Qur'an. But let's pretend, right, this is your mushaf on the shelf. It is most likely going to be in the recitation, the qira'ah of Āṣim. Āṣim, Ain, Alif, right? Āṣim is going to be Āṣim. Āṣim had 2 students, right? And this is where you get in, what does it mean to have a qira'ah and a riwayah? So, to have the qira'ah, this is the master teacher of who becomes the main person that disperses this. Of course, it goes back in its chain to the companions and then ultimately to, right, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you can think of Āṣim as the master transmitter. He had 2 students. Ḥafṣ, right, who is the one who is the transmitter of Āṣim, of Imam Āṣim, and his other student, Shu'bah. Now, many of you may have never even heard of the name Shu'bah. So if you were to open up the typical mushaf copy of the Qur'an, probably if you look somewhere in the beginning or in the end, you'll find something, 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 Ḥafṣ an Āṣim, right? It's going to be the recitation of Āṣim according to Ḥafṣ. So actually, you know, when we say it in the Arabic, Ḥafṣ an Āṣim, we kind of read it back in the reverse order in English, right? It's the narration of Āṣim according to his student Ḥafṣ, or according to his other student, Shu'bah. So we have roughly 10 qira'at of the Qur'an, 10 recitations that we consider permissible to recite in for the salah. Al-qira'at al-ashr, right? The 10 recitations. And you can think of those as 10 master reciters, of which each of them had 2 students. So there's Ḥafṣ an Āṣim and Shu'bah an Āṣim. Now, I personally have studied and most commonly recite in 3 that I'm still working on the others, right? But I have 3 that I most commonly recite in. The one, and I'll give a demonstration here in a minute, my preferred is the qira'ah of Ibn Kathīr, right? An al-Bazzī. Ibn Kathīr an al-Bazzī. Now, when I say Ibn Kathīr, I do not mean the Mufassir, right? Like sometimes, like it's like saying a person is Muḥammad and there's only one person named Muḥammad. No, there's Muḥammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then there's Muḥammad. There's lots of Muḥammads, right? So there is the Mufassir much later on, very famous, his tafsir, right? When I say Mufassir, right, the person who wrote the famous tafsir Ibn Kathīr, you've probably heard of. That is not who we're talking about. Imam Ibn Kathīr was actually the Qari of Mecca in his time. And if I have a chance, maybe I'll post a link to a more detailed explanation of all of this. So just like Imam Āṣim, he had 2 students. Qunbul, Qaf Nun Ba Lam, Qunbul and al-Bazzī. Some say actually al-Bazzī and al-Bazzī. I think the stronger is al-Bazzī, but could be also al-Bazzī. And that's what I'm going to recite for you. Actually, both just to give a demonstration. So this is according to the mushaf of Ḥafṣ an Āṣim, the most likely one of the copy of the Qur'an that you have. This is from Surah al-Baqarah, and I'm going to be beginning from the 213th verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كان الناس أمة واحدة فبعث الله النبيين مبشرين ومنذرين وأنزل معهم الكتاب بالحق ليحكم بين الناس فيما اختلفوا فيه وما اختلف فيه إلا الذين أوتوه من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات بغيا بينهم فهدى الله الذين آمنوا لما اختلفوا فيه من الحق بإذنه والله يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة لما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. That is in the recitation of Ḥafṣ and Āṣim. And now I'll recite the same passage, inshallah, in the recession al-Bazzī عن ابن كثير. al-Bazzī عن ابن كثير. Now, one thing to note, because of some of the differences in the qira'at, in the recitations, you will also note then that there are differences in the ayat in terms of there's the same number of words in the Qur'an, but in one recitation, an ayah may begin and end at a certain place, and others will differ. So, for instance, what I just recited was from the 213th verse. The same passage in the Mus'haf of al-Bazzī an ibn Kathīr starts at the 211th. So there's a 2 ayah difference in terms of where they place the beginnings and endings, right? But it's all of the same kalimat, all the same words. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كان الناس أمة واحدة فبعث الله النبيين مبشرين ومنذرين وأنزل معهم الكتاب بالحق ليحكم بين الناس فيما اختلفوا فيه وما اختلفوا فيه إلا الذين أوتوه من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات بغيا بينهم فهدى الله الذين آمنوا لما اختلفوا فيه من الحق بإذنه والله يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Now, you may have noticed in slight difference between the two. So in the first, in the Ḥafṣ recitation, you'll notice there was more mudud, right? Meaning that there were more times where there were some very long vowels that were extended. And you will also notice that one of the rules that we have in the recitation of Ibn Kathīr, one is actually there's a shortening of the mudud. There's a few places where there are, but a lot of the other, like for instance, in the rules in Ḥafṣ, where you will make a longer med, right? That in al-Bazzī, or actually in Ibn Kathīr's recitation, it is shortened. Personally, that's actually why I like reciting in Ibn Kathīr, because I find Ḥafṣ, and particularly Warsh, which we didn't even get to, right? Imam Nāfi's school of recitation, it really requires a lot of wind. So I like Ibn Kathīr's recitation because it's a little bit easier. You probably notice also that, for instance, in Ḥafṣ, we would say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتيكم مثل الذين خلوا, right? So you'll notice it says, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا. Whereas in Ibn Kathīr, we have a rule that if you end a word, or in particular a noun, right? It could also be a verb with a pronoun attached, but right, it's a noun or a verb that ends with the third person masculine plural, whom, right? Ha and mim, whom. If you end with this, in Ibn Kathīr's recitation, it becomes humu. Hum sakin fi Ḥafṣ, humu fi Ibn Kathīr. So you will hear in a couple places where there is, it can be either the third person masculine, whom, or the third person masculine plural, or second person masculine plural. So it can be either whom or kum. So listen, right? You'll hear أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم. Now, when we get to a place where it's permissible to pause, then we make it sakin, right? For instance, where we ended with min qablikum, if we were to continue reading, it would actually been what? Min qablikumu, right? So if you were to not run out of breath and to read the passage, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول whoo! And that's where I usually tend to run out of breath, right? So alhamdulillah, we have those places in there for where it's permissible to stop or to pause. So this is just, now usually might say, man, why, what is all this? Why can't I just read Ḥafṣ? Alhamdulillah, read Ḥafṣ, it's fine, right? Just read. But the Qur'an is a book like no other. It has the capacity to provide endless avenues of appreciation, of ta'zeem, of amazement, its language, its meaning, its elegance, even just the science of its recitation, and even further, the differences in the differences in its different narrations and its different recitations. When I was younger as a new Muslim, I really focused first on the Arabic language, alhamdulillah, because I wanted to be able to read. I wanted to be able to understand what I was reading. And then later, I made a decision to study the different qira'at and riwayat of the Qur'an. And I personally found it really fascinating. And yes, sometimes there's subtle difference. There can be subtle differences in the meaning. Overall, the meaning is the same, but there can be subtle differences in the meaning. And it just really gave me a whole nother level of appreciation that is beautiful, as the Qur'an can sound one way, there's, all these other ways. So I just found it really, really fascinating. So for instance, you take the reading in Surah Ad-Dukhan in the 51st ayah, at least of the Ḥafṣ reading, and it reads, إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي مَقَامٍ أَمِينٍ. But for instance, in Warsh, which again we didn't even get to, maybe I'll do another one, in the reading of Warsh, particularly of Imam Nāfi's school, إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي مُقَامٍ أَمِينٍ. Now, what's the difference? Maqam and muqam, right? One means that they are in a safe place, right? It means that the pious people in Jannah, they will be in a safe place, which Jannah is a safe place. The other slight inflection is that not only are the believers, or the al-muttaqun, the people of taqwa, the pious people, not only are they in Jannah, which is definitely a safe place, but there is a place in Jannah called Amin. It's the name of it, Not just simply its attribute. So in one reading, it's that they're in this place that has this quality, Maqam Amin. The other, it gives the inflection that it is that, but on top of it, its also name is Amin. Now, maybe this is just for nerds, but alhamdulillah, I find these little inflections, or how, وَيُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ وَنُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ. And I'll do another video about what we call of the rasm of the Qur'an, This is partly where the differentiation in these pronunciations, where you can have yufassilu and nufassilu, And I'll do another video on this at some point. But the wording changes from he explains to we explain. It both means that Allah does the explaining. It's just in one recitation, Allah is referring to himself in the third person. And in another, he is referring to himself as the royal we in the first person. But the meaning is all the same, And part of the permissibility for this, if you'll note, between yufassilu and nufassilu, the first letter in this verb, in the conjugation of fassala, yufassilu, to explain, is what? The ya and the noon. What's the only difference between a ya and a noon? Well, a ya has two dots on the bottom, and a noon has one dot above. As some of you know, and maybe some of you don't know, is that in the beginning, there were no dots, There were no dots on the letters. It was just like loop-de-loop, right? There's no dots. And there were no tashkil marks, no fatha, damma, kasra, shadda, sukun, right? None of those marks. Those are all later on for the musta'arab, like for the people who would eventually, for the ajami, right? I know sometimes people think that's a horrible term, right? But essentially for the non-native speakers. And therefore, because you can write in the original way, a ya and a noon, they look identical once you remove the dots, right? And therefore, this becomes an acceptable inflection, right? But of course, they must equate to the same meaning. Whether it is an Allah will explain or we will explain, both of them are Allah explaining. It's just the perspective from third person to first person, right? So anyway, just something, I thought maybe you would find interesting about a little bit of Quranic lore, a little bit of Quranic knowledge, and maybe we'll go a little bit deeper into some of these things in the days ahead, being that you and I probably aren't going anywhere fast. وصلواته وسلامه على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم.